Hi, everybody. My name is Jenny Allen, and I'm coming to you from the If Gathering offices. And I'm coming to you pretty sober today, as we all are. I know if you're tuning in right now, then you've probably heard a little bit about what's happening in Iraq recently. And I know all of us are heavy. In fact, for months, many of us behind the scenes have just kind of been pacing and praying and asking God, how do we help? Because when you hear of such evil, when you hear of such injustice and such suffering, I think humans want to rise up and be a part of that and to help. And so many of you have asked that question. Many of you have processed, what does it look like for me to engage this need? It just feels wrong. We live in a time on the earth where we get to see need. We get to hear about it. We get to see the pictures of real faces that are alive right now and that are suffering. And it feels like there's got to be a way. If the world is this small, if we can see it, then surely there's a way to engage it. And so I think what has happened in the last few days is that a mode of helping has been placed out there, and all of you have said, yes, I'm ready, I've been waiting, I've been praying, and I've been waiting to do something more. So what we wanted to do today is to host a conversation with Anne and hear about her experience over there, hear more about it. We also wanted to introduce you to Jeremy Courtney, who is on the ground in Iraq and who has this passion to risk his life to see the people of Iraq equipped and empowered and unleashed for their purposes and protected from ISIS. And so his organization, Preemptive Love, is doing that on the ground. I think the beauty of what Preemptive Love does is that it's got a home team advantage. Many organizations pulled out of Iraq with the dangers and the threats of ISIS, and Jeremy stayed on the ground. And so I think you will be so moved by his story, by what you hear from him. So we're going to go right now to Anne, who is actually having more technical difficulties than Jeremy is in Iraq. So right now, Anne, you made it. So Anne, why don't you talk a little bit, begin just with the last few days, what this has meant to you, the response to your blog.
Since I've come back from Iraq, I have carried the stories of those 4 women that I spent about an hour and a half to 2 hours with in that shipping container. Like this holy responsibility that I was given to tell their story well, and to see a community, the church, step into that space and care about those women. I really don't have words for that, Jenny. I am speaking to the questions. I felt like I was touching hemorrhaging wounds, and I had that conversation and explained to them that I wasn't asking them questions out of curiosity's sake, that if they could entrust that story to me, I would carry it out to the world, and we would send help, and people would come to help. So I'm deeply moved and unbelievably humbled that a whole community right across the block is there in that space and said, we hear the voiceless, and we will use our voices to spread that message. We are here to hold their hands and help them, and we are more, but do we get to serve more? So I'm just so grateful that their voices have been heard and people answered.
Jeremy, I want to introduce you to everybody. He is the author of Preemptive Love and the founder of the organization, and his voice has brought a lot of understanding into this issue and the things happening in Iraq through CNN, and many other organizations lean on him because he's on the ground and he cares about the people. So Jeremy, welcome. And why don't we start by just you talking a little bit about what is happening on the ground in Iraq. We watch the news, we see the pictures, but you're living there among it. Tell us what you've seen.
Well, thanks so much, Jenny, and thank you, Anne, and thank you, everyone who's tuning in. You guys have been an incredible encouragement to us over the last couple of days. As you can well imagine, life here on the ground in Iraq sometimes can feel extremely dark, extremely lonely. We labor away, we work 18, 20-hour days sometimes to protect and serve and love these people who have become our people. And sometimes it just feels like we're not getting anywhere, and sometimes it feels like we don't have the community behind us that we so wish these friends would have. And you guys have pretty much obliterated that sense of loneliness and isolation over the last couple of days. So that's been incredible. And on behalf of our whole team, and on behalf of really hundreds of real Iraqi friends that we have all over this country, and thousands, tens of thousands more that you're going to help us serve. Thank you. That's the first thing I would say.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Preemptive Love, and so much money has been given in just such a short amount of time, and everyone trusts Anne because she's been on the ground and seen it. And I can say, having known Jeremy for a few years now, he is incredibly trustworthy. My brother-in-law is on the board, and I actually called him and just said, tell me about the organization. And these grown men all but week talking about what Jeremy's doing on the ground and how powerful the influence is. But can you explain to anybody that doesn't know what kind of work Preemptive Love does on the ground? Can you tell the story and what's been happening, Jeremy, behind that?
Yeah, so to understand where we are today, we kind of have to take a bit of a circuitous route, an unlikely route, but that's how God works, isn't it? So when my wife and I moved to Iraq nearly a decade ago, we've been here since the middle of the last war, when the sectarian violence was at its height. We've seen this kind of stuff before. We've lived through this kind of season before. I think that's one reason why we're a little bit more steady and a little less alarmed today than maybe we might otherwise be. So we were here in the middle of the last war, and we've been here ever since. I was sitting in a hotel, working on my laptop, minding my business in the cafe, was working on a document, and the chai guy at the cafe in the hotel sidled up to my table, put my tea down on the table, and said, hey, you know, Mr. Jeremy, you've been coming to my cafe for a while now. We're friends, right? Can I ask you a favor? And I said, yeah, man, go ahead. And he said, well, I've got this cousin. He's a guy like you and me, 20-something-year-old guy, and he's got this little girl. And she was born with this huge hole in her heart. And after all these decades of Saddam's dictatorship and Saddam's chemical weapons attacks against our people and wars and UN sanctions, she is not going to survive. She needs this life-saving heart surgery, and she can't get it inside this country. There's not a hospital or a doctor that can save her life. You're an American. Can you help? And so we started with that family, trying to see what we could do to provide that one little girl with a life-saving heart surgery. And one thing led to another, and it turns out that when hope shows up on the scene, there's a pretty big market for hope in a place like that, in a time like that. And so soon after we helped one girl, there was another, and there was another, and my phone was ringing off the hook, and our office was filling up with requests, and we came to this fork in the road where we had to decide, is God really doing something here? Is he drawing us into this specific community of children who have been so vulnerable and so affected by war? Should we give our lives to these kids? And that's what we chose to do. In the process, we started in that one strict channel, providing life-saving heart surgeries for Iraqi children. We've done that now for nearly a decade, and over the years we've earned a great reputation for it here in Iraq. But what we've found more than anything else is that we're not actually a heart surgery organization. I'm not a heart surgeon. I'm not any more of a heart surgeon today than I was 10 years ago. What we are is we're a peacemaking organization. We're a movement of people who believe that God created us all in his image, and so we bring this really unique, I think, perspective to the ground where we're willing to love our enemies. We're willing to go where no one else will go, to love who no one else will love. And so we've been with the poorest of the poor, and we've been with the most powerful people in the country, from the Prime Minister to the First Lady, the President, Vice Presidents, parliamentarians, governors, all over the country. We've earned their trust. And so when ISIS came on the scene in such a big way last year, we were among the most well-positioned organizations left in the country to do something with that trust, to leverage our knowledge, to leverage our decade on the ground, and to do something else, and to really admit to ourselves, perhaps for the first time, you know what? We're not a heart surgery organization. We're an organization that goes where there is need. And so that's what we've been doing since last summer when ISIS sprung on the scene so profoundly. And now today we find ourselves in a diverse array of things, from providing immediate relief and aid to people, to now more recently helping start businesses. They start providing the relief themselves, and they won't need us anymore.
So Anne, just talk a little bit about your trip. Let's hear what it was like on the ground when you got to meet face-to-face the women that Jeremy's part of helping.
Oh, Jenny, there was a lot of fear going into that trip, to be totally honest with you. My family all had to really sign off, but they were all good for me to go. We were just 3 weeks out from the 21 martyrs, the 21 men that were decapitated by ISIS. So for my kids and my husband to say, yes, I think God's calling you to go to Iraq was a big step, but we trusted Jeremy, we trusted Preemptive Love, and stepped into that space. And I was so grateful Lynn Hybels came with me, and we flew into Erbil. And to be honest, I had Googled that the week before we went, ISIS is within 40 miles of Erbil, and you're going, are we doing the right thing here? But I just think, in the North American church, we can talk a lot about loving the other and pouring our lives out and sacrificing, but do we have some skin in the game? Are we really, really willing to go? And I guess I really wanted to say, you know what? The North American church does care. We are going to risk something. We've been called to do this. So getting down on the ground with Jeremy and his wife and their team, and them taking us to hear stories, it seemed very surreal, actually, Jenny, because you know what? All I do is I read CNN and New York Times, and it seemed like it was far away. But to be standing in front of people to hear them say, we've lost everything. We had rockets blowing up our home with ISIS. We grabbed our kids. We ran, got to bridges that ISIS had blown up. We couldn't get away. And asking them, what's your greatest dream? And tears from women saying, I just want to take my kids and go home. And to know that there is no home to go to. And what could we actually do? So hearing the stories over and over and over again, and seeing how Preemptive Love was standing in the gap, I think I had in my head, Jenny, that these people, 3 million internally displaced people in Iraq, I thought they would all be in tented camp somewhere, and that's really not the experience at all. They have come and they just find abandoned buildings. They find anywhere at all that they can grab their people all together and try to regroup and to figure out how are they going to survive and how are they going to live. And Preemptive Love has found these people and are the bridge between where they're at and what they need to survive. So we were bringing food to these people and listening to their stories. Jeremy and his wife and his team were listening to their health concerns and how do we get them to doctors. And then these women talking about, Suzanne having a baby that she had birthed and so little and so small and pneumonia. You're living in a shipping container, so how do you get health care for that situation? And we saw a baby, one woman had a 12-day-old baby in really, really difficult conditions. So I guess my heart was on fire for people who were saying, my life was completely normal. We had a car, we had jobs, my kids went to school, and because of ISIS and the violence that's happening, we have lost everything. And all I could keep thinking, Jenny, was my kids and my husband, and what would we do if some violence and evil was coming against us and losing everything? I would pray to God that there would be people in the world that would use their position and where they were to rise up and risk everything for the people outside the gate. And I've been to Haiti and Guatemala and Africa and seen poverty, and we need to pour ourselves out. And hearing these women's horrific stories that involve such psychological trauma. And I think, the ministry of presence is so powerful. But how to the pain, hold pain. And people, I've never seen the power of the ministry of presence. And I think it's what Jeremy's saying, us as a community now, to stand with Preemptive Love and say, we hear, we have listened, we are present to this issue, and we're not turning away. The horror of their story, you want to turn away, Jenny. It's awful. You want to go back to a nice, comfortable life and not hear about little 9-year-old girls being violated. I mean, it felt like a horrible story to have to tell. But if we don't tell it and we stay blind, I don't want to stand before Jesus and say, there was howling for help. And I just sat in my comfortable position and I didn't do anything.
And thank you. I just want to say thank you on behalf of everybody that read your blog, and just, I know that that wasn't easy, and I know it feels like you're picking a fight with the biggest enemy in the world right now, and I just want you to know you're not alone, and we're so grateful that you went and that you told the story. Jeremy, talk to us a little bit about your dreams, about what you hope happens. So much money has been given. You have the attention of the world right now, and everybody wants to help. What do you dream about? What do you hope happens next?
Oh man, we in Iraq put back together. That's not a fantasy. We dream of women put to work and not forgetting their losses, being able to live meaningfully through their losses. We all know people in our own personal spheres in life who have suffered great things, and some of them are obliterated by it. Some of them somehow survive. I think there's a place that's going to happen here. We dream of reconciliation. We dream of people standing hand in hand, putting this place back together. We dream of loving our enemies. Dream of a movement, including you, who would dare to acknowledge that ISIS is still us. They are our brothers and sisters, and they are made in the image of God. And as horrific and counterintuitive as it is to think about that, we should be very, very careful to want the destruction of men and women who are loved by God and made in His image. And so if we can get to a place mentally or theologically or in our faith, acknowledge that, then we say, okay, how then should we live toward our enemies? If that's true, then how then should we live toward it? So we might start out with our fists up looking for a fight, and then we can at least put us down, and then hopefully we can find a way to reach our hands out. And I think that's part of our dream. On small levels here in Iraq, we dream it in Canada, we dream it for Detroit, we dream it for Austin, and we dream it in big ways for the Middle East and for a major reconciliation and friendship between Christians and Muslims, learning how to live together. That's some of our dreams.
Yeah, not a big deal. No big deal. Small dreams. I think for you to have the light you have in your eyes, Jeremy, and to be on the ground and live with the stories that Ann just talked about day in and day out, and to say for your message to be to us that we love our enemies and not hate them, it is unthinkable, really, and it's beautiful, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for the witness of that. What does that look like for us? What does it look like for us to help? What does it look like for us to pray? What does it look like for us to come beside you as an organization on the ground there?
Well, I mean, there's no denying it. Money's not everything. Money in the hands of someone like ISIS is a horrifically scary thing. So money's not, but money in the hands of people who have that vision that I just said, money in the hands of people who want to remake the world by unmaking violence, I think that we can do great good with what you guys have already done. When we go into these places that no one else is willing to go, they know who we are. And when we reach out to the people that we're not supposed to reach out to, when we help widows, when we help the orphans, when we help the outcast, that speaks something tremendous. And in that very moment, it starts to realize and accomplish those dreams that I'm talking about. So food packet, may not always be the ideal of international aid standards. Many of us have read When Helping Hurts. We don't want to be a part of the problem. We adhere to that. religiously, we are deep in development thoughts. But we're also deep in peacemaking thoughts. And we recognize that some of these things start a long-term journey with them, or a journey with the community. And we can provide the very bridge that people walk across to get back to one another. And so whether it's empowerment grants that we use to start small businesses, whether it's continuing news about the fall of Ramadi, the continual displacement that's happening from our neighbors. We know a whole other round is coming. Some are offensives if they go forward and try and liberate Mosul. We know there's going to be a whole other round who aren't yet in a place to starting a business. They're just going to need water, and they're going to need shelter, and they're going to need food. And like Ann said, these people aren't primarily living in tent cities. 91% of the 3 million people who don't have an internet home, 91% of them do not live in a tent city. And so that means we have to go into some of the hardest neighborhoods in the country and work with some unsavory people to make sure that we're reaching those that no one else is willing to reach. And that's what you're resourcing us to do right now.
And talk a little bit about the dreams you have. I know no one has spent more time on their knees for these women and children than you. So talk a little bit about what you're hoping for as the money continues to pour in. I think, is it up to 500,000 today? Did I hear that? Insane.
Yeah, yeah, we are right at $500,000. So I can't thank everybody who actually responded and didn't just say, I'm always telling my kids, people who would say, someone else will go, someone else will do this, but say, I want to stand up and I want to be part of this, and I get to be the gift. I get to do this and have the privilege and the joy of giving. I think when I left Sosa and Layla and Mara and all of those children in that shipping container, and they're a sliver of what you see over and over and over again throughout Iraq and throughout Kurdistan, the northern part of Iraq. I just really realized if somebody doesn't help, help is not coming. If it's not us, there is nobody else. And that was what I was turning and saying to Jeremy and to his wife. What happens to these women who can't read, who can't write? There isn't a support system to catch these women at all, and these beautiful children who aren't in school. What does that look like? So actually this morning, voxing back and forth with Jeremy and his wife and talking about, okay, so we are going to go ahead and be able to send tutors out to those women and sit with those women this summer and have school, so we can give them the actual tools to go ahead, read, and write. That makes me want to cry. And to go ahead and get those kids into school. And that ball is already rolling. So throughout Kurdistan and the northern part of Iraq, we're going to get kids into school, and we're going to give women who really need to be invisible. I can't imagine not being able to read or write or even be able to sign my own name. And to give them that kind of dignity and that kind of visibility again, and the tools. I guess I really believe that our Creator God heals us in being able to create and contribute. And I think part of the trauma these women feel can be healed knowing that they can make something and contribute to something. So I think going ahead and being able to give those women startup grants to start businesses and really traveling with them and not just giving them a grant and abandoning them, but actually coaching them and staying with them. And that's been a conversation that I've been having with Jeremy and his wife Jessica and his team for the last month, trying to figure out what does this look like long term to travel with these women and for us to really build a bridge from west to right. And then I think, to get kids into school. That little boy who takes his pen out of my hand and starts to scribble and write, and knowing that he's made in the image of God. God's got plans and hopes for that young boy that the light in his eyes. I don't want ISIS, evil or violence in this world to dim it or darken it at all. To know that you can go ahead and be the bridge to preemptive love, and they can get little boys like Mohammadine and his sisters into school so that we can fight back against ISIS and the radicalization of angry young boys, and we can get girls who aren't in vulnerable positions where they can be trafficked and violated and made to stay in. I am beyond ecstatic and really looking forward. Jeremy and I have been talking about telling the next phase of these stories, what you have all given and invested and contributed, what it has done in Iraq, to be a light in the face of darkness. And the light will overcome the darkness, Jenny. I believe it with all of my heart. Jesus said it, and we will live it.
Yeah, it's happening. I wanted to tell you, in case you have not seen the place to give yet, it's preemptivelove.org/if. So if you can go there and be a part of this movement, I know I don't want to miss this. I want to know that when I'm before God one day that I got to be a part of things like this. And I know that you all feel the same way. And so I just think so many of us are not called to necessarily move to Iraq and to go out and live among the people, but we can support the people that are. And the other thing I just had a thought about, Jeremy, is there might be somebody out there that is listening that might feel like they are supposed to be a part of on-the-ground efforts. Is there any way to contact the organization with their gifts and talents if they can come be of service over there?
Absolutely. Our website has a very obvious contact form that's available at the bottom of the page, and you can hit contact us, send us your idea, your inquiry. I'd love to talk to you about it.
What physical needs, what actual needs do you have on the ground where people might be able to help? Do you need doctors? What do you need the most of?
Man, that's a great question. I think one of the things that I call the leader in the militia today, militia that have been so, what's the word, so maligned in Western media. So I called one of the top leaders in the militia today and asked, how are things? What's going on? What do you need? What are you seeing? The first thing he said, it's disabled, man. The disabled, they are so vulnerable right now. And Jess and I have seen it with our own eyes for years across this country. In fact, one of the very first kids that we met in birth defects was a disabled child, unable to walk kind of disability. And so physical therapists, something like that, are could really make use of. I think one or two physical therapists, something that we could put to meaningful use. And there's just a lack of understanding about what's possible for a child born with cerebral palsy or born with spina bifida or born with an inability to walk or something like that. And sometimes those kids are lovingly condemned to home life. No one means to do them wrong. People just don't necessarily know better. They don't know that those kids experience significant upgrade in their ability to move and walk and interact with people if they'll just be exercised and things of that nature. So that's one thing that comes to mind, maybe a small portion of your group. Admin staff, I mean, this takes work, and there are some certain admin who might be interested in having some where we can talk about some of that more offline. But yeah, the physiotherapist piece is a piece that comes to mind most immediately, I guess.
Yeah, that's something to think about. There might be some people out there that either you're interested or you might know somebody that is. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, Jeremy, is you are in harm's way every day, and you chose this, and you and your wife had stayed even as it's gotten more and more dangerous. Talk a little bit about where that comes from in you, the conviction you have to stay.
Comes from a journey. I think on day one when we arrived here, these people were my enemies. You know, I probably was smart to say that out loud, but in my heart, my fists were very much up, and I was looking for a fight. And over time, these have become my people. And I'm home here. My kids are here. My daughter just poked her head in. You know, this is where we live. These are our people. This isn't an adventure for us. This isn't a foray. This is our life. And so you do what you do in life. I mean, you put up with the hard times and you enjoy the good times. So that's one of those. That's one of the things I would say. The other is that I don't know. Somewhere along the way, I read Romans 5 and heard that God loved us while we were His enemies, and that made a profound impact. I'd grown up hearing that God loved us while we were yet sinners. And I guess somehow that word had lost some potency with me, but when I heard that God loved us when we were His enemies, that injected new life into my faith. When I started to view the gospel and the whole Jesus story through the lens of enemy love, it invigorated me in a powerful way to now look at the Jesus story as not just kind of pietistic, beloved narrative. There's a place for that, but to also see it as one who lays down his life for his enemies. And totally inspiring and invigorating. And we have decided as a family. My wife Jessica is so fully on board with this as she sends me out the door to Fallujah and Baghdad and some of the hardest places in the world. We have decided there are worse things than dying, and there are far scarier things like staying alive for not much of anything at all, for no real purpose, for no real impact, for no real passion. That's what we're running from. More than we're running from ISIS, we're running from a passionless, meaningless existence.
So, Anne, real quickly, why don't you just talk a little bit about what everybody can do to help, what you've seen them do, and what you hope they will do following this broadcast?
I've been overwhelmed and laid low by a community that has blogged about it on their own blogs, tweeted, Facebooked, Instagrammed. You know what I've seen, Jenny? Men say, I can do something from North America to help people in desperate need. I tuck my 9-year-old into bed, I tuck my little kid into bed, and I feel like, what do I do in North America? And I'm thrilled to see women say, I can make a difference, whether it's $5 and sharing it on my Facebook page, whether it's getting my people together at church and we'll have a fundraiser for Iraq. How many kids, little girls, little boys, we can get into school and defy ISIS that way. I've been overwhelmed by people thinking outside of the box and saying, how can I use my skill set in Iraq? And I think, when I was sitting there with those women, afterwards, Berlin, which is part of a young woman on Jeremy's team, he had messaged me and said, I was trying to explain to the women how you want to help them start businesses, and they didn't know your name. So I said to them, remember the woman who came and cried with you? And they turned to each other and said, oh, remember the lady who sat with our tears. And I just think there's something really powerful about how can we sit with other people in their tears and their pain. Maybe that looks like reaching out to refugees in your own community, and how can you go ahead and help refugees in your own community. But I think it's that ministry of presence is so incredibly powerful, and how can we be present to people's pain, whether it's right around the corner, or whether it's in Iraq, or whether it's, as a family, we are going to spend every day this summer praying for Preemptive Love, for Jeremy and Jessica and that team, for ISIS and the light to overcome the darkness. I think prayer is the tool that we say, well, what can I do? I'm going to pray, but no, prayer is so powerful. Am I going to take it to my small group at church, and we're going to make this our priority for the next 6 months? I just think that too long we've said ISIS is a headline and CNN can't do anything about it. And I think you overwhelmingly showed the world that we can do something about it, and we will do something about it. And mamas and papas and little kids all across North America can stand up to ISIS and do something. And you are doing that in droves. And I'm just standing up, cheering and clapping my hands. And I love you all desperately.
Jenny, let me also just say that one of the things I love so much about Ann that has been at the core of why this, and this is subtle, it's going to be lost on some, but one of the reasons is because Ann has refused to be sectarian. She has refused to be tribal. She has refused to say, I'm a Christian, they're killing my people, I'm going to help Christians. She has instead framed everything about her life, and therefore this conversation, as I'm made in the image of God, they're made in the image of God, I deeply value and treasure the image of God, and therefore I'm going to help all of those who are made in the image of God. That is a total game from what a lot of the church is talking about. Most of the church, most of our politicians who engage this from a perspective that it would seek to leverage faith, choose to do it in the Christian versus Muslim kind of dynamic. And I am here to tell you, we are hand in hand with Muslims who love Christians and treat them as brothers of this country and want so much Christian brothers, their Yazidi brothers, all these other groups in the country. Muslims aren't the bad guys in the story. Muslims are also the heroes and the victims all the time. And that is something that Ann fought on through this journey. And the whole army of Obama's and everyone else standing behind him have rallied behind that. Priceless. Because, again, money in the hands of people who don't see it that way is money in the hands of tribalists and sectarian people, even if they be Christian, is a dangerous thing. And so we've seen it before. And I love that Ann has not made a religious battle in that way. She's made it about the image of God and that has made all the difference.
So talk a little bit about that perspective and how that actually plays out in the Christian in America online. How do we need to be careful and hold our tensions?
Well, I think that some of this is just hard to do until you know a Muslim, quite frankly. It's the air we breathe, the fishbowl we grew up in, our atmosphere, our water, for many, if not most of us, has probably been a fairly, if not a very acute anti-Muslim world. And so to break out of that fishbowl, you're going to have to do something drastic. You're going to have to ram into the side of that fishbowl pretty hard if you want into another atmosphere. And so I think that I can say words about how Muslims are nice people and beautiful and they're my friends, and I'll meet every one of them. But until we have our own Muslim friends and until we go beyond the boundaries of our own likeness, it's just hard. It's just hard to understand because the greater culture has helped inculcate that into us for so long.
And do you have something to add to that? I feel like you do this well. You love
no,
well.
I don't know if I do it well, Jenny.
You do.
I think before I went into Iraq, I was in Israel for 7 days and then flew from Israel into Iraq. And I think, Jenny, that was the thing that just overwhelmed me. All of the warring and all of the fighting. You see it in the Middle East with actual guns and violence. We have our own kind of verbal violence and our own us and them here in North America that may not involve guns, but it's a war of words in all kinds of different ways. And I was just overwhelmed with this sense where I just wanted to cut people's faces and say, we are all made in the image and likeness of God. When we act out in violent ways towards each other, we are desecrating God. Whether I believe your personal beliefs, as a born-again Christian who believes that in the cross and that I am redeemed and saved by Jesus Christ, I believe that He is the way. That doesn't, because I believe that doesn't mean at any point I can desecrate the image of God in you who may believe something very different than I believe. And I guess I was overwhelmed with this about how can I make my life about the Imago. We see, even in our own us and them conversations here in the North American church and in our culture, and as Christians and non-Christians, we are made to reflect the image of God. Each of us are holy creatures created by God. How can we honor God in each other and love each other? And I think, I've been overwhelmed lately that love doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with you. Love doesn't necessarily mean agreement, but it does mean that I will suffer with you and I will sacrifice for you. So how can I suffer with you and sacrifice for you, regardless of whether I agree or disagree with you? And I think that means, how do we lay down our lives for the people that we disagree with and say that I will reach out across, fences aren't ours, and we have to reach across those fences and love each other. That's what Jesus did for us. And I keep talking about the Esther generation, and Esther stood in the palace. She looked at all of those people out of the gate, and she said, I will risk everything. If I die, I die, but I'm in this place for such a time as now, to risk everything for the gate. And I think that's what Jesus has called each of us to do, to rise up as these Gen Esthers, this Esther generation, and say, I will sacrifice and I will suffer for those outside the gate. I will sacrifice and suffer for those who don't necessarily believe what I believe, but they're made in the image and likeness of God, and I will hallow God, and I will not desecrate his image in those people around me.
And I think we've seen a lot of that in the last few days. It's been beautiful to see the conversation turn from hate into love, and to have faces that we can picture. And I think that the other thing is we hear something and we've become numb and desensitized to it, and we don't realize that this could be us if we were born in a different place. And so what I love is that this whole movement is about friendship. It's about linking arms with somebody that isn't less than, that isn't even wholly other than. It's just that they're in a different circumstance, and the tables can be turned. So if you want to give and you want to be a part of this, again, the link is preemptivelove.org/if. And you can go there now and give. And so I want to close, and Jeremy, do you have any last words for everybody?
Thank you. I cannot say that. Thank you for caring. Thank you for standing with us. Thank you for not giving up and not looking away, standing strong. That means so much to us and so much to our friends around this country. Two things that I feel like I may not have said well. One, some people have rightly asked through our website and on Anne's Facebook page and elsewhere, how could you possibly do all these things that you claim to be doing? I mean, last year you said you were a heart surgery organization, and now you're trying to put thousands of kids back in school. You're trying to renovate school buildings. You're trying to start small businesses. You're giving aid to thousands of people in very diverse places across the country. How is it possible that you and a small team can do all this? I'd like to answer that real quickly. We work with Iraqis. That's how we do it. We're not the great hero story. Iraqis are always at the forefront of everything that we're doing. They know their land better than we do. We'll go anywhere with them. We'll be on the front lines with them. But Iraqis are the heroes of the story. So we work through diverse volunteer networks, association, clubs, organizations, religious groups. We work with the mosque. We work with the church. We'll work with anyone to honor the image of God, our friends here. So that's one good question that I don't have an answer yet. The other is, what are we hoping to accomplish? I got kind of philosophical on some of that about the dreams and the big vision, but to be a little more concrete, we want to give aid, food, water, shelter. We want to give education to kids who need education. That's going to be building schools in some places, building expansions onto school buildings to accommodate more displaced children who weren't there last year or were originally built. And it's going to be housing and complex moving pieces to get these 10,000, maybe 20,000 kids back in school. But we're aiming for it, and with your help and God's grace, we hope to accomplish it. We're still doing healthcare. We're still providing life-saving medicine to kids all over this country. We're still working with the top powers of the country and the poorest of the poor. And so I just wanted to be a little more concrete about how you leverage your generosity for greater good. Thanks.
Well, and to that point, Jeremy, I feel like it's so wise that you do the bridge building piece work well, because you're on the ground and you see the need. And sometimes we can survey all the organizations that we can give to, and what we don't know is which one is actually doing the work, and you're on the ground and you're watching it. So it's good to know that in a sense you're stewarding this money to the places that there's the most need and the most good work being done. So I know that's not an easy task, and I'm grateful for your wisdom and the way that you're discerning all of that. And will you talk just a little bit in closing just about your thankfulness and what you've seen happen, and just, you know, have a chance to thank everybody?
Yeah. In some of my travels and the places I've gone and sat with people, I've always tried to hide the tears and not cry in their presence. And I couldn't stop the tears when I sat with Suzanne and Layla and Mara. And I was so embarrassed when I left that shipping container, and I kept apologizing for my tears. And Erin, who is part of Preemptive Love on Jeremy's team, she turned to me and she said, "You need to pray, Anne, that God will keep you broken." And I think, you know, that's what I'm praying for the North American church. Is it's painful and it's vulnerable to stay in a broken place where you feel people's pain. It's easier to numb ourselves out and to sort of inoculate ourselves to pain and to turn our faces away to easy and comfortable and nice. And what I'm praying is for, yes, there are hard stories coming out of Iraq, and I told a hard story, and I'm just so grateful for all of the people who are willing to say, I'm willing to be broken. I'm willing to be broken and given and not turn away. So I want to thank everybody who stepped into the story and pain. That's being like Jesus, who stepped into that broken place and was broken and given. So I want to thank them for being willing to be broken, and I'm cheering them on to stay broken and not to forget the stories, and to engage into hard places, in difficult, messy places in their own communities and around the world, and say, I will walk through messy places and stay broken and be broken and given. I can't thank everybody enough for standing up in all of using their influence. And we all have influence in our own communities, in our churches, in our families, online, with our Facebook communities. They use their influence for those who had no voices. They were Esthers. And I can't cheer them on enough, and I say, go. God's lit fires in you, passions in you, and go burn and light the world on fire, and let that light overcome the darkness. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So right now what we want to do is just pray, and wherever you are, we're going to internet pray all over the computers. So wherever you are, just bow your head and beg God with us to move in mighty ways to heal his land and his people. So let's pray. God, I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for just the way that you built technology in such a way that we can gather and be a part of something like this together. We can meet need, and I pray that in the pain and suffering of people created in your image that you built, that you love, God, would you steward these gifts and these offerings and these sacrifices that so many people are making into healing, into hope, into peace, into a future, into knowledge, into desire to walk with you, God. I pray for those that are on the ground working. I pray for Jeremy, his wife, his children. I pray for the community that he lives in and his team. God, would you strengthen them, and would you protect them? Would you give them the resources that they need in every way, not just financially, God, but spiritually, emotionally, relationally, God, would you meet all of their needs? I pray for the many, many lives that are tucked away in corners of Iraq right now, that are tucked away in oppression, that are afraid for their lives, they're afraid for their children's lives. God, we can't really imagine that. We can't imagine what that kind of oppression feels like. And so, God, we pray that God, you can, and we know that, and we thank you that you sent Christ, and you know what it means to suffer, even physically. And so we ask that you would pour your Spirit out on them in comfort and peace. And God, would we be a part of that? Would we just be the hands and the feet that go on your behalf and love well and meet need? Would you continue to raise up an army within your church, wherever it comes from, God, we just pray that your love would go forth, and that we would not cause any more harm, that we would not use our words to distract or to cause more hate, that we would use our words, God, the words that you give us, to bring peace and love and hope. Thank you so much for your body and how beautiful it is when it all comes together and works in this way. In Jesus' name, amen. So thank you guys so much for being part of this, and I know everybody that is watching is praying for you and with you, and as much as we can support, as much as we can do to help, you let us know. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. God go with you all. Thank you, Jenny, so much.
You're welcome.